Pachinko, here we go. Let's get it started. Welcome aboard. We are the Katari Story Choo-Choo Train since 1994. We will take you to a magical mystery story tour. Please join us. This is our 27th Katari Story show. Last year, as you may know, we couldn't have it. Unfortunately, coronavirus pandemic continued this year too. Yes, we are like running through a long tunnel, but we didn't want to miss our event 2 years in a row. So we're going on the internet this year. We have been supported by two big organizations, Japan Foundation Toronto and Toronto Storytelling Festival. Thank you very much for your support. Now, we would like to have a few words for opening from Karen Blair, a member of the board of the Toronto Storytelling Festival. Please welcome Karen Blair.
As Yusuke said, Katari has been part of a Toronto Storytelling Festival for 27 years. This is the 42nd year of the festival, which means Katari has been part of it for over half its existence. Storytelling Toronto was pleased to support Katari again this year and hopes the relationship continues. Over the last few weeks, the festival has presented several great events. But it's not over yet. Today we have the opportunity to listen to the Katari Japanese storytellers tell stories about tracing back the Silk Road. The festival will return again next year for the 43rd year. It will be the 28th year for Katari, as we expect they will be part of the festival once again. You can find out more about Storytelling Toronto and its programs at storytellingtoronto.org. On behalf of Storytelling Toronto and the Toronto Storytelling Festival, I'd like to thank Katari and wish them continued success.
Koko Kikuchi has been telling the tales of Iwate Prefecture since 1990s. He found this Oshira-sama story in the book of Tohno Monogatari, written by Kunio Yanagida, the founder of folklore studies in Japan. Oshira-sama is a sacred, enshrined figure that has horse head and its body is dressed in kimono. Koko has told this sad but beautiful story many times before, and when he told this story at the cultural event in Seoul, South Korea in 2014, something sparked in my head. I thought, wait a minute, this story might have a secret chord that connects Korea and Japan. The key words are horse and silkworm that are not native to Japan. Almost 2,000 years ago, horses and silkworms were brought to ancient Japan by a lot of immigrants from Korean peninsula. They must have made a living by working as horse breeders and silkworm farmers and weavers in the adopted country, which is good, but at the same time, they must have had a hard time trying to assimilate to the different culture while preserving their own culture too. Having said this, please welcome Koko Kikuchi.
Mist surrounds the plateau. It softens the light from the sun burning in the sky. Deep in the mountains of Hayachine, there is a village of Tohno in the northeast of Japan. Long time ago, there lived a pretty girl and her father in Tohno village in Iwate Prefecture. They had a beautiful young white horse, and his body shined like snow in the sunlight. The girl ran with the horse on plateau every day. Every evening, she leaned on the gate to the stable and talked with the horse throughout the night. They were always together. They were happy together, running together, talking together. They couldn't be apart a moment. They are always together. The father didn't like this situation and started to hate the horse. One day, when the girl was out of the house, he took the horse to the mountain behind the house and hung him on the mulberry tree. Poor horse, he suffered greatly as he died. His shining body was hung off of the branch of the mulberry tree and shining like snow in the sun. When the girl came back to the house, she found the body of her beloved horse in the mountain. She ran towards him. She was out of breath, but still she ran. When she finally reached him, she collapsed in tears, cried, 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 until her tears were dried up. Suddenly, the shining body of the horse started to float into the air. The girl climbed on to the back of the horse, and both started to flew high into the sky. They skimmed over the mountains and going higher and higher and slowly disappeared. The father wept over his daughter's disappearance and continued to grieve over his misfortune for a long time. My dear daughter, my sweet child, how am I supposed to live for the rest of my life without you? Not a single day passed without tears. And then one night, the father saw his daughter in his dream. Forgive me, my father. You loved me so much. To repay you for the love you gave me, I will give you silkworms whose heads look like horses. I will leave them in the kitchen on the first day of spring. The silkworms are reincarnation of me and horses. Silkworms are reincarnation of me and the horse and produce cocoon which shine like snow in light. The father waited and waited and waited for the first day of spring, and the day finally came. He waited for the sunrise and dashed into the kitchen and looked for the silkworms. Here they are! Reincarnation of my daughter. He took the silkworms onto his hand and had a good cry. The father fed the silkworms with the mulberry tree leaves from the mountain. Soon the silkworms produce cocoons which shine like snow. The pure white cocoons were turned into a piece of silver cloth. The silver cloth shined exactly like a horse. The father cut the branches of mulberry tree and crafted them into a pair of statues of totem. One was for his daughter, and one was for the horse. The totem were named Oshira-sama. Mist surrounded the plateau. The sun was shining softly in the sky. Deep in the mountains of Hayachine, there was a village called Tohno in the northeast of Japan. The villagers took good care of silkworms and produced beautiful piece of silver cloth which shined like white horse in the sunlight. The Oshira-sama were guardian of silkworms. Dondo hare.
I hope you enjoyed the story. The next story will take you to an alternate dimension. The story of Urashima Taro is said to be the most unique folktale in the world, in which the protagonist takes the time travel for a span of 300 years. Please welcome me. Okay. Hiccup.
And take 3.
Urashima Taro, Back to the Future. This is one of the stories you will inevitably come across when you learn Japanese culture, because everybody grows up with this story. However, I had a problem with this story even when I was a child. I didn't like the ending of the story when Urashima suddenly turns into an old man engulfed in a smoke. You may say, it's a surrealistic ending, that's for sure, but I felt it left the story incomplete. I didn't feel comfortable. But then I discovered a Shikoku Island version that has a different ending, and that dissolved my feeling of ambivalence. The new ending made me happy, and I hope you will like it too. And the story goes like this. I'd like to start it with the theme song of Urashima. 昔浦島は助けた亀に連れられて遊具場へ てみればにもかけない美しいさ昔々 a long, long ago, there lived a fisherman called Urashima Taro. He was living with his old mother in a small island. They were poor, but they were happy together. One day, when Urashima was walking on the shore to go home with a basket full of fish he had caught, he saw a bunch of kids making noise in a circle. Ah, it's a turtle! Kameda, kameda! He saw a turtle in the middle of them, but the kids are kicking on the shell of the turtle. Oh, kora kora, yamerasai, cut it out. Don't abuse animals. Here, take this and go home. He gave them a big fish. Kids were delighted and went home, waving their hands. Goodbye. And when he looked back, the turtle was already back in the water, waving its fin. Ah, sayonara, kame-san. Don't come back, or you'll get in trouble again. But the turtle did come back. One day, when Urashima was out on the sea, on his small boat, he was fishing, but he couldn't catch any fish for hours. He was already tired and hungry. Ah, お腹が空いた. But just then, the tip of the fishing rod began to shake hard. Oh, これは大きいです。It's gotta be a big one. So he pulled it hard, real hard. But what appeared was not a fish, a huge turtle. Ah, I can't eat a turtle. He put it back into the water, splash. And he put the rod again into the water. But soon, he felt a big pull. Oh, it's gotta be that same turtle. Oh, no, I have to catch a fish, not a turtle. Oh. But to his surprise, what appeared was not the turtle, but a beautiful woman, dressed in a wet green dress. He has never seen such a beautiful woman in his village. Startled, Urashima lost his word. Then the lady graciously bowed to him and said, Urashima-san, I am Princess Otohime of Ryugujo, the sea palace at the bottom of the sea. Thank you for saving my life the other day. Huh? The other day? Oh, so you're the turtle on the shore. Yes, I am. I was so scared. I thought I would be killed by them, but you saved me. Thank you. I'd like to show my appreciation. I'd like to invite you to my sea palace. Please come with me. And when he noticed, he was already riding on the back of the shell of the turtle. The turtle dived into the water, deeper and deeper. Urashima felt like he was a fish himself, or he felt as if he was watching the sea world from the window of what you may call submarine of today. We all live in a yellow submarine, wheel submarine, yellow submarine. And when he arrived at the Ryugu-jo, a big reception was waiting for him. Red fish, blue fish, all dressed in color, tropical colors, were dancing to the music. And then Princess Otohime led him to her secret rooms. When she opened the first door, a beautiful spring scene was there. All the sakura trees were in full bloom. They went on a ohanami picnic together. And when she opened the second door, summer appeared with hot sunshine and birds were singing. They enjoyed Midsummer Night's Dream together. Now, they were seriously in love. When she opened the third door, they saw a beautifully colored forest. They feasted to their heart content. And when she opened the fourth door, they saw mountains covered with white snow. They sang the song of 4 seasons, Shiki no Uta. 冬を愛する人は心広き人、寝雪を溶かす大地のような僕のお母さん。The person who loves winter is a generous-minded person, like the Mother Earth that melts the snow, like my mother who embraces my heart. But Urashima, shocked to hear the word "okasan," mother. Yes, he had totally forgotten about his mother, whom he had left almost 1 year ago. Oh, I have to go. My mother must be waiting for me, all worried. At this sudden farewell, Otohime looked sad, but she did not stop him from going back home. Instead, she brought a gift for him to take back home. 3 lead box. And she gave him a strange warning. Urashima-san, you are to open this box only when you feel entirely lost, helpless. Urashima was not quite sure what it meant, but he accepted it and nodded. Hi. And they bowed and said farewell to each other. When Urashima arrived at his home village, he was totally confused, puzzled. The shape of the mountain, the distance, looked the same. And islands off the coast sat at the same distance, but all the other scenery was totally different. And on top of that, people walking by were dressed in a strange fashions. And then a bunch of kids, local kids, surrounded him and looked at him suspiciously. Who the heck are you? Where are you from? Why are you dressed like that with a chonmage top knot on top of your head? Urashima took it seriously. What's wrong with my chonmage? I am Urashima Taro. I was born and raised here in this village. Who are you guys? The boys looked more puzzled. Is this guy insane or what? They disappeared. Yes, 300 years have passed since he left this village that morning. Now, Urashima was totally confused and lost. The only thing left for him to do was to open the present from Otohime. He sat down there and opened the present 3-layered box from the top layer. In the first layer, he found a bird feather, crane's feather. He wondered what it was for. And in the second layer, he found a mirror, small hand mirror. And lo and behold, when he opened the third layer, a white smoke came out and engulfed him. Mock, 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 mock. As the smoke enveloped his body, he felt something strange happening to his face. And so he grabbed the mirror and looked at it. And there he saw an old man who looked totally confused and sad. Now, he was an old man. Urashima waggled with his bent back, yobo yobo, yobo yobo. And he kept walking around the village looking for something that looks familiar to him. And finally he found a tombstone of Urashima family, where his mother must have been buried. He sat there and apologized for his long absence. And then something strange happened. He felt his body becoming lighter and lighter until he felt as light as a feather. And then he discovered 2 big wings growing on his back. And then he flew up into the air, higher and higher, and he kept flying around the tombstone. And then far offshore he saw a turtle swimming toward him, waving its fin. Ah, Otohime-sama, Urashima-sama. The couple recognized each other. Although they have transformed into the different figure of a crane and a turtle, they now looked different. But that didn't bother them at all. They were more attracted to each other because of the differences, each one beautiful to behold. And the couple lived happily ever after. Today, the couple of a crane and a turtle has become the symbol of long life and happiness. And now, in spring, you can feel them dancing and singing with joy. Here, there, and everywhere. in my life. I love you more. Oshima. I hope you enjoyed a different edition of Urashima Taro. The original edition seems to go back way before 8th century, because one of the oldest mythology books, Nihon Shoki, already had this story. Originally, the palace, or the utopia, where Urashima was invited, was not located under the sea, but in a mountain in China, Mount Horai, which was the utopia for the Buddhists. So, I assume the author of Urashima Taro might have been one of the hundreds of students and monks who had been sent to China to study in 6th or 7th century during Sui dynasty or Tang dynasty. Imagine when he came back to his home village in Japan after long years of absence, he must have gone through the same experiences as Urashima did. At the same time, he must have missed his friends and lovers he had left behind in China. He might have felt like flying back to see them. So, the story of Urashima Taro might be an old man's reminiscence of his young and happy days. Next, we will bring you back to early 20th century. Seiko Shirafuji will present the poems created by Misuzu Kaneko. Seiko-san is a retired medical doctor and dentist. Actually, she used to be my dentist as well. She's been singing and performing in many community events since 1990s. Please welcome Seiko Shirafuji.
金子 Misuzu was born in a rural village in Yamaguchi Prefecture, facing the Sea of Japan, extremely near where I was born. Misuzu's parents ran a bookstore, and my parents also ran a bookstore. Misuzu had only one daughter, and I am a mother of only one daughter. Because of our similar life circumstances, I feel very close to Misuzu and I feel great pride, as if I had known her as a relative. Growing up surrounded by books, Misuzu's creative imagination was very enhanced, just like Anne of Green Gables. Misuzu wrote many poems. People started noticing her remarkable creativity and sensibility of her poem. In Japan, 100 years ago, misogyny was an existing problem. Women must obey parents when they are young, and after their marriage, women must obey their husbands. After her marriage, her oppressive husband prohibited her from presenting her poems publicly and even prohibited her from writing. Misuzu devoted her life to the well-being of their only daughter. Misuzu's husband was a womanizer and transmitted venereal disease to Misuzu. Misuzu decided to divorce him for her daughter's sake. Her husband complied with divorce. However, in those days, husband had sole custody of children. In order to protect her daughter, Misuzu came to conclusion that there is no other way than taking her own life and leave a note asking her mother to look after her daughter. Misuzu took her own life at the young age of 26. After the Second World War, Japan became a democratic country. In fact, I was able to receive equal opportunities in my education and my profession as man. However, gender inequalities still exist in many areas, such as employment, marriage, and child custody systems. In my case, I decided to leave Japan in order to keep my maiden's name after my marriage. The main purpose of my presentation is to let as many Canadians as possible to experience Misuzu's wonderful poems. And my big wish is that Misuzu's life story will help to achieve gender equality in Japan soon. Today, I am introducing 3 poems from her works. I hope you enjoy and appreciate them. こだま。遊ぼうって言うと、遊ぼうって言う。バカって言うと、バカって言う。もう遊ばないって言うと、もう遊ばないって言う。そうして後で寂しくなって、ごめんねって言うと、ごめんねって言う。こだまでしょうか？いいえ、誰でも。草の名。人の知ってる草の名を私はちっとも知らないの。人の知らない草の名を私はいくつも知ってるの。それは私がつけたのよ。好きな草には好きな名を。人の知ってる草の名もどうせ誰かがつけたのよ。本当の名前を知ってるは空のお日様ばかりなの。だから私は呼んでるの。私ばかりで呼んでるの。私が両手を広げてもお空はちっとも飛べないが、飛べる小鳥は私のように地べたを速くは走れない。私が体をゆすってもきれいな音は出ないけど、鳴る鈴は私のようにたくさんの歌は知らないよ。鈴と小鳥とそれから私、みんな違ってみんないい。
Noriko Yamamoto is a Toronto-based mime dancer, silent storyteller, choreographer, clown, visual artist, and Nia instructor. Today's performance is a mime dance piece called The Swan. Noriko created this piece for Sadako, her first friend in Canada. Sadako's courage and fighting spirit took her and her 3 children to a women's shelter to escape domestic violence. Some years later, while successfully being a single mother, she got cancer, and then cancer again. It was a long battle. Upon completion of this Mime-Dance piece, Noriko told her friend, who was in the hospital at the time, that she would be performing it at a small gallery. Ever the optimist, Sadako promised she would see it when discharged. Sadly, soon after, she left this world, leaving 3 teenage children behind. At the celebration of her life ceremony, Noriko performed this piece, honoring Sadako and allowing her to see it. Ron Korb is a Grammy-nominated flutist and composer. He has traveled around the world collecting bamboo flutes and various indigenous world flutes. He's a Yonsei, fourth generation of Japanese descent. He lived in Japan for 2 years, exploring his identity and culture. Inspired by these experiences, he produced his legendary album Japanese Mysteries in 1993. In 1996, he also performed at Kenji Miyazawa's 100th birthday celebration in Toronto, together with Katari's storytelling group. This and his award-winning album, Asia Beauty, are my favorite albums. He will tell us his Fukuoka My Love story. Please welcome Ron Korb.
Minasan, konbanwa, or konnichiwa, depending on what time you're listening to this. You can see this is my wife's garden, and you can see she has a cherry tree, or we have a cherry tree, which reminds me of Japan. It's also raining, which also reminds me of Japan, as it rains there all the time. And even though it's May here in Canada, it is a bit chilly, and I think maybe we should go inside and have some Japanese green tea. Okay, now this is better. Some hot Japanese tea, some ocha. I feel like Mr. Dressup or Friendly Giant. Thank you so much for listening today. If you do know me, I hope some of you do. If you do know me, I'm very grateful. But if you do know me, it's probably because I play the flute, this instrument here, this particular Japanese flute. What you probably don't know is how this experience that I'm about to relate to you completely changed my life and completely changed who I am as a musician. I was born in Toronto. I grew up in a very normal middle-class Canadian household, except my mother was Japanese Canadian. And the fact that she was Japanese really did give me a strong sense of identity. Partly due, quite honestly, to feeling different than the other children. Back then, there weren't very many mixed children. And when I was young, there weren't many Asian children in my class. And nobody was from Japanese descent. Also, growing up, most of the family gatherings at Christmas and New Year's, the topic of the internment of the Japanese Canadians during the Second World War would invariably come up. For most of us my age, I think there was a feeling of wanting to put those stories behind us and just assimilate into Canadian society. But for me, there was always that burning desire to know more about my roots, and in my case, more about that enigmatic and mysterious country of Japan. So here's the problem: finding my roots. My grandfather, Sanosuke Enyu, was born in 1867 in Fukuoka, Japan, and came to Canada on May 19th, 1894 to study the Canadian fishery. Now you might ask, how is it possible to have a grandfather that was born like 150 years ago? Well, my grandfather was a bit older than my grandmother, for starters. My grandparents had 7 children, and my mother was the youngest of those 7 children. And then she had me, her one and only child, when she was in her 40s. So because of that, there's this incredible time gap between my grandfather and me, and also even myself and my cousins. So anyway, getting back to Sanosuke Enyu, my grandfather, after he was living in Canada, in British Columbia for some years, he returned to Fukuoka to get married. And he met my grandmother, Moto Otsuyama, and who was from a samurai family. And he brought her to Canada in the early 1900s. Now, as you can imagine, over all that time, that we just lost the connection with any blood relatives in Japan. This was made doubly hard by the fact that my grandfather's name, Enyu, his surname, was not even his birth name. He was actually adopted by another family. So the beginning of my search, I only knew a few things. I knew my grandfather's name, Sanosuke Enyu. I knew he was born in Umami, Fukuoka. And I knew my grandmother was of samurai heritage. So with this little information, we enlisted the help of a gentleman at the Japanese National Tourist Organization, JNTO, to translate a letter for the local township in Umami. And then in the letter, we told them that my mother and I would be making a trip to Japan in the following year. Miraculously, we got a response from Tetsuya Tsunada. He got the letter from the council and invited us to visit when we came to Japan. Now, my mother hadn't been to Japan since she was a young girl of 19. And back then, she was completely unaware of any living relatives. When we landed in Japan at Narita Airport, my life changed. Even just taking the bus to Tokyo and seeing all the lights and drinking in the immenseness, the enormity of the city, I felt like I was going into the future and as well going back into the past at the same time. There was all this high-tech gadgetry and space age look of the city, but there was also an adherence to customs reflected in the food, art, architecture, and the way of life. We started our sightseeing in Tokyo, and we worked our way down the spine of Japan to Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe, where my mother had lived. My mother found absolutely nothing recognizable about Kobe. Everything had been rebuilt and changed, and it was actually quite a disappointment to her. We continued our trip. We went to Hiroshima, and we continued to go south all the way down to Hakata, or otherwise known as Fukuoka City. We arrived there Saturday, April 16th, 1988. The following part I'm going to read actually from my mother's diary. April 17th, Sunday. We had a phone call in our hotel room. It was Mr. Otsuyama saying Mr. Tsunada had told him about us and he was waiting in the lobby. We packed in a hurry and went downstairs to meet him. He was a man of 76 years. Soon, Mr. Tsunada and our interpreter came to get us. Mr. Tsunada was a school principal and he got his English teacher to be our interpreter. Mr. Tsunada treated us to orange juice in the lobby where we sat and talked. He asked us then to come to his home, and then we proceeded to travel in a car for approximately 2 to 2.5 hours. About halfway there, we stopped for lunch. Everybody had sushi. I had tempura. My mother, even though she was Japanese, didn't eat raw fish at all. So she actually never ate sushi in her entire life. She always refused to. But tempura was one of her favorites. Mr. Tsunada paid. Ron tried to pay, but Mr. Tsunada insisted. We continued to Mr. Tsunada's home. When we arrived, Mr. Tsunada's mother, his wife Seiko, Mrs. Yamamoto were all working very hard preparing for our stay. We took pictures in front of the house. In the evening, they made a nice dinner for us, sashimi, sea urchin, and other dishes. We talked with my poor Japanese. It was very hard. The next day, Mr. Tsunada took us to Yanagawa, where my mother lived. So in other words, where my grandmother was born. He was so kind to get a large car, and they brought a friend to act as an interpreter who had lived in the States. When we arrived in Yanagawa, Iwao Otsuyama, who we saw the day before, was there to meet us. Iwao was related to our grandmother. He showed us some of the beautiful sightseeing points in Yanagawa, like the house of the famous poet and writer Hakushu Kitahara. Yanagawa is a picturesque city lined with canals and riverboats. It's often referred to as the Venice of Japan. He also took us to the house where our grandmother, Omoto Otsuyama, was born. It was no longer a residential house, but a beautiful kimono store. Mr. Otsuyama took us to the mausoleum where the ashes of the Otsuyama ancestors are kept. He then gave us a family tree that traced the Otsuyama origins all the way back to 614 to Fujiwara no Kamatari. Fujiwara no Kamatari was the founder of the aristocratic Fujiwara family that ruled during the Nara and Heian periods. As you can imagine, this experience was life-changing. It was the reason that 2 years later I went to live in Tokyo. It is what inspired me to study traditional Japanese flute, and in 1993 create an album called Japanese Mysteries with my friend Hiroki Sakaguchi. Japanese Mysteries explored the interesting facets of Japanese culture and history. And you can hear it on Spotify and iTunes, etc. And now from that album, I'd like to play a piece called Tokaido, or Eastern Sea Route in English, with a collection of images from that trip and various trips to Japan. Thank you very much for listening and hope you stay safe and healthy during this COVID time. お疲れ様でした。気をつけて。